Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. Here, the very absence of light feels serrated. That conviction circles my thoughts, a vulture over carrion, as I cower within the caretaker's hut, straining against the sounds from the enveloping dark. Movements where none should be, an entity or entities desiring ingress. This posting, I ought never to have accepted it. Clarity arrives sharpest in retrospect, naturally. Yet 3 weeks passed, submerged in student loan arrears and facing expulsion from my squalid city flat. The advertisement shimmered like a mirage of salvation. Guardians sought for Solitude Peak Lodge, off-season tenure, absolute self-sufficiency, and tolerance for profound isolation, essential, remuneration generous, lodgings provided. It read like deliverance, flight from urban clangor, a space for mental decluttering, perhaps even the incubation of that novel, deferred for seasons innumerable. The interview itself was perfunctory, a telephonic exchange with a man whose voice rasped like dry gravel, seemingly less concerned with my credentials than my capacity for rudimentary upkeep. Lodge is shuttered till spring, he'd grunted. Just need eyes on the place, pipe checks, generator tending, the usual. Nearest town's a good 30 miles. You'll be proper alone. That sit right with you? I had affirmed it would. A solitary inclination had always marked me. This remoteness wasn't a condition to endure, but a privilege to embrace. Such calamitous innocence. The initial week unfolded with deceptive tranquility, bordering on the sublime. Solitude Peak Lodge, a timbered behemoth that slumbering high amongst granite peaks, ringed by sentinel pines and vistas that stole the breath. My obligations were negligible, daily pipe inspections, ensuring the generator's steady thrum, logging maintenance needs for the eventual spring awakening. Days were spent charting the grounds, lost in literature before the main lodge's colossal stone hearth, and yes, tentatively coaxing forth pages of my manuscript. The nights breathed peace, filled only with the sibilant sighs of ancient pines, punctuated by the rare ululation of an owl. Then the harmony fractured, subtle dissonances at first, objects displaced from their designated spots, prints alien to my own boot tread pressed into fresh snow. Once, a distinct impression of phantom colloquies drifting from vacant guest suites, though investigation yielded only silence and dust motes dancing in stray beams. Self-reassurance became a mantra, imagination, the weight of solitude pressing inward. Maintain routine, stay occupied. But the anomalies intensified, grew bolder. One dawn revealed the grand hall's furniture, transposed into a bizarre tableau. Another afternoon, returning from rounds, I discovered every tap within my cabin turned wide, loosing plumes of scalding steam across the floorboards, and the nocturnal disturbances, scratching, insistent upon the outer walls, ponderous footfalls traversing the roof. Once, a sound terribly akin to a human shriek that pinned me, paralyzed by dread, beneath my blankets until the gray light of morning. Attempts to contact the lodge proprietors proved futile. Landlines remained inert, my mobile bereft of signal since arrival. The isolation was absolute, terrifyingly complete. It was then I unearthed the journal. Tucked within a drawer's deceitful floor, its pages bore script, fractured by haste or terror. They exist, it began. The folklore, the hushed warnings, truth underpins them all. The forest's occupants, the susurrus after dark. Voracious they are and seething. Merciful heavens, they crave entry. The chronicle continued, a descent into escalating horror. Shadows that slithered against the wind's direction, visages glimpsed at pains only to vanish upon direct gaze, and the ceaseless, crushing sensation of being observed. The final entry froze the marrow in my bones. I cannot linger. Their audacity swells. Last night's siege nearly breached the walls. Dawn is my exodus. Reader, if these words find you, flee. Flee before they tire of their sport. Reason screamed to heed the warning, to abandon everything and trek out immediately. Yet a mulish kernel of disbelief resisted. A hoax, surely? Some elaborate, cruel jest orchestrated by my predecessor? And so I remained. Now entombed in darkness, the scratching at my door escalating into a frenzy. I comprehend the full, fatal magnitude of my error. It commenced shortly after sundown bled across the snowfields. I was within the main lodge, performing the evening's checklist, when the illumination faltered, then died. The generator, I assumed, starved of fuel, but inspection revealed its tank brimming. No logical cause for the outage existed. That's when the sound reached me. A low, guttural resonance, seemingly sourceless yet omnipresent. I bolted for the sanctuary of the caretaker's hut, flashlight beams slashing wildly as panic seized control. Scarcely had I slammed the door shut when the true assault began. Something immense struck the barrier, the impact vibrating through the small structure's very bones. Wood groaned, splintering audibly. Hinges shrieked under duress. And the voices? Dear God, the voices. A low susurrus at first, insidious beneath my own panicked gasps, swelling into a legion's chorus. A cacophony of persuasion and menace. All breathing my name, Silas, all pleading for admittance. I fought to occlude them, to concentrate, to conjure an escape from this waking nightmare. But egress was impossible. The hut was encircled, and even if a path through the besiegers miraculously opened, the nocturnal forest promised only a different, slower demise. I was ensnared. Hours have bled away, stretching into an eternity. The siege waxes and wanes. Sometimes, merely the rasping nails or talons dragging across timber and glass. Other times, the percussive blows return, impacts so violent the cabin feels poised to disintegrate, and perpetually, the voices, their tactics shift. The pleading has ceased, replaced by seductive promises. Riches, renown, influence, all desires I've harbored, they claim, can be realized if only I unlatch the door. Yet beneath the dulcet tones resonates the raw thrum of hunger, of incandescent rage. These entities, whatever their nature, offer no reward. They intend only to consume. I've retreated to the bedroom's flimsy haven, barricading the door, though the gesture feels laughably futile. My arsenal: a hearth poker, a paring knife, a canister of bear deterrent discovered in a closet. Pathetic talismans against the encroaching void. As I commit these words to paper, huddled in the corner furthest from the besieged door, I hear them now, plodding in the dark interstices of the wind, their whispers weaving new strategies. Their patience frays. Soon, I sense, the pretense will shatter, and they will simply unmake this shelter to reach me. I harbor no illusions about rescue, nor certainty that these pages will ever meet another's eyes. But should Providence allow this journal to survive the dawn I doubt I'll see, let it stand as testament and caution. The dimness here has fangs. The mountain's whispers are not benign. They hunger. Heed this, reader. Depart now. While the path remains yours to choose, do not repeat my folly, born of pride or desperation or simple disbelief. Because when dusk paints the peaks and the long shadows stir, it is already perilously late. They will seek you as they now seek me. The wood of the bedroom door splinters, groaning its imminent failure. They are nearly upon me. Time evaporates. To whoever unearths this chronicle, forgive me. Forgive my failure to halt them, to sound the alarm sooner. Please be wiser, be warier, and above all, turn a deaf ear to the mountain's sighing invitations. Refuse them when they murmur your name, because if you acknowledge them, you'll be. The pre-dawn chill clung to Silas like grave dirt, but it wasn't the cold that stopped him. It was the indentation marring the steel skin of his apartment door. Not paint, not grime, a handprint, impossibly large, pressed inward, buckling the very metal. The warehouse shift, a monotonous eternity of stacked crates and droning machinery, had bled the energy from him, leaving only a dull throb behind his eyes. This was something alien. His skull ached with the need for oblivion. Vandals, he muttered, the thought thin against the palpable strangeness of the mark. He fumbled the key, the lock yielding with a familiar click. Inside, the air hung still and heavy, a pocket of undisturbed time. His work boots thudded onto the linoleum. The keys skittered across the formica counter. Steam and scalding water offered temporary solace, washing away the warehouse grit, but not the image seared behind his eyelids. Clean cotton, cool sheets. Oblivion claimed him swiftly. A sharp crack shattered the silence. Silas's eyes flew open, heart instantly hammering against his ribs. The red numerals on his bedside clock glared. 4:47 a.m. Oh, he held his breath, straining against the sudden absolute quiet that followed. 30 seconds stretched into an eternity. Then from the kitchen, the soft shush of a drawer sliding open. A pause. The gentle clink of contents disturbed, the drawer closing. Another. Methodical. Unhurried. Bile rose in his throat. Alone? He lived utterly alone. No one possessed a key. His fingers groped for the phone on the nightstand, finding only cool, empty wood, charging, in the kitchen. Damn it. Another drawer whispered open, the sound punctuated by the rattle of silverware. Adrenaline surged, cold and sharp. Silas slid from the bed, his bare feet seeking purchase. A floorboard groaned beneath his weight. Instantly, the kitchen fell silent, utterly, terrifyingly silent. The closet yielded a familiar weight, worn ash wood, his old baseball bat. Knuckles white, he crept, the sliver of hallway visible through the bedroom door, a void of black. Silence stretched taut, distinct than a sound that defied the quiet. Slap, slap, slap. Wet, heavy, like bare feet on a cheap linoleum, but the cadence was broken, stumbling horribly wrong. A shadow flowed across the visible strip of hallway, impossibly elongated, grotesquely broad. It didn't move like anything human. The wet slapping halted just outside his door. Breathing followed, thick and ragged, like air forced through waterlogged lungs. Slowly, inexorably, the door swung inward. Silas raised the bat, muscles screaming, but the sight that filled the frame turned his limbs to stone. It towered, head grazing the ceiling, a caricature of anatomy sketched in shades of corpse gray. Skin stretched like parchment over angles too sharp, limbs too long. Arms dangled below knees that bent backward, avian and obscene, terminating in hands like warped platters, hands that perfectly matched the impression on his front door. Its face was a horrifying blankness, save for the gash that split it ear to ear, revealing nested rows of needle teeth. A viscous, dark fluid oozed from its chin, pattering onto the worn carpet. Paralysis held him captive. The thing's maw gaped impossibly wide, the rasping inhalation intensifying. A stench rolled off it, putrid decay and swamp mire, thick enough to taste. It lurched forward, its bird-like legs propelling it in a jerky, unsettling gait. Those massive hands swung loosely, fingers twitching. Primal instinct broke the spell. Silas swung the bat with every ounce of strength, a desperate arc aimed at its ribs. The impact was solid, a dull thud, yet the wood rebounded as if striking granite, jarring his arms, forcing the bat from his numb fingers. The creature registered nothing. One enormous hand swept toward him. He scrambled beneath the descending arm, raw panic lending speed. His shoulder cracked against the door jamb, a distant pain irrelevant. Adrenaline screamed through his veins as he sprinted down the hall, the wet slap, 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 accelerating behind him, gaining. He reached the front door, clawed at the knob. It refused to yield. Locked? No. The deadbolt was thrown back, the chain dangling free. Yet the door stood firm, immovable as if fused to the frame. The pursuing sounds ceased. Fetid breath, hot and heavy with decay, washed over the back of his neck. Slowly, dread coiling in his gut, Silas turned. It filled the narrow passage, floor to ceiling, somehow vaster than before. The ghastly mouth stretched into a rictus grin, displaying infinite teeth receding into darkness. A colossal hand reached. Silas hurled himself sideways, crashing over the low coffee table, scattering magazines. The creature flowed after him, its head scraping the ceiling, leaving glistening trails on the white plaster. He scrambled up, bolting for the kitchen's relative light. The phone, still plugged into the wall. He snatched it, trembling fingers fumbling for the power button. Nothing. A dead black screen stared back. Impossible. It had charged all night. A shadow eclipsed the doorway light. The thing stood there, its frame somehow contorting to fit the smaller opening. Both hands extended, fingers splayed wide enough to encircle his waist. Blindly, he grabbed the nearest object, a chef's knife from the dish rack, blade still gleaming wet. He lunged, slashing wildly at the closest hand, the steel bit deep into the gray flesh. No blood welled, only a thick, black ichor that spilled onto the linoleum, sizzling and steaming on contact. A sound tore from the creature then, not a roar, but a high, piercing keen that vibrated Silas's teeth and made his eardrums ache. The wounded hand recoiled, but the other lashed out with blinding speed. Fingers like iron bands clamped around his chest, crushing the air from his lungs. Effortlessly, it hoisted him clear off the floor, drawing him inexorably toward that featureless horror of a face. The mouth yawned open, wider, impossibly wider, the jaw seeming to unhinge. The charnel stench intensified, a suffocating wave. Endless rows of needle teeth gleamed wetly in the dim kitchen light. Fueled by sheer terror, Silas drove the knife into the thick wrist, pinning him. More black fluid erupted, cascading down his arm, searing his skin like acid. He cried out, a strangled gasp of agony. For a fraction of a second, the crushing grip faltered. Silas wrenched himself free, hitting the kitchen floor hard amidst the spreading pools of steaming, corrosive liquid that were now dissolving the linoleum. Acrid vapor filled the air. He scrambled, fleeing toward the bathroom, the last sanctuary, the only door left. Behind him, the creature's keening intensified, a sonic assault that rattled the window panes. He slammed the bathroom door, twisting the flimsy lock, knowing it was futile. A tiny window above the toilet offered a sliver of hope. He scrambled onto the porcelain lid, reaching for the latch. The door imploded, bursting inward in a shower of jagged wood fragments. A hand, larger than his entire head, groped through the ruined frame. Silas stumbled backward, lost his footing, and cracked his skull against the porcelain edge of the sink. Stars exploded behind his eyes. Through a swimming haze, lying on the cold tile, he watched the creature contort its impossible bulk through the doorway. Its maw stretched wide once more, but this time, something else emerged from the depths of its throat. A glistening black tendril, long and serpentine, that writhed with its own obscene life. It snaked out, touching his leg. Agony, white-hot and absolute, lanced through him. A scream built in his chest but died, soundless. Darkness encroached, tunneling his vision. The last thing he comprehended was the immense tooth-filled cavity descending, eclipsing the world. He awoke gasping in his own bed. Sunlight, sharp and mocking, sliced through the window blinds. A dream? A fever vision? Then his gaze fell upon a carpet, pocked with melted, irregular holes. He saw the mangled ruin of the bathroom door, the jagged splinters littering the hallway floor, and on the front door, now starkly visible from the inside, the deep, metallic indentation of that monstrous hand. That was 3 days past. Sleep had become an abandoned country. Each night, precisely as the clock digits shift to 4:47 a.m., the sounds begin anew. Wet, dragging footsteps as emanating from the kitchen. Closer, Zzz's each time. He'd fled. Motels, the cramped confines of his sedan, hours spent driving aimlessly through deserted streets. It made no difference. Wherever he was, 447 brought the sound. Last night, leaving a greasy roadside diner, he found a fresh print pressed deep into the hood of his car. Tonight marks the fourth cycle, a certainty colder than the pre-dawn chill settled in his bones. There would be no fifth. Dusk bleeds the color from the sky. In hours, mere hours, 447 will arrive again. Somewhere in the apartment, a slow, steady dripping has begun. It echoes in the quiet, growing louder. A relic of sun-baked millennia, the alabaster urn had no business migrating across its velvet plinth. Yet the monitor before me offered irrefutable, chilling testimony. Frame by digital frame, it slid, untouched by any visible hand. A glacial current snaked through my veins. That flickering image, an impossibility captured in sterile pixels, heralded a night poised to fray the very fabric of the known, blurring the stark divide between slumbering history and the wakened present. 6 months I'd haunted these echoing halls, a nocturnal custodian trading silence for study hours. Elias Thorne, doctoral candidate by day, guardian of dormant history by night. The museum, vast and sepulchral after dark, offered a sanctuary for poring over ethnographic texts. Typically, my greatest adversary was the leaden weight of drowsiness pulling at my eyelids during the graveyard shift. Routine patrols, the hypnotic cycling of security displays, then the comforting density of my books. Until this particular night sheared normalcy away. The clock chimed 10, releasing old Barnaby into the city's embrace as I commenced my solitary vigil. My initial circuit unfolded beneath the wan glow of emergency fixtures, each artifact casting elongated, skeletal shadows across polished floors. A profound hush reigned, the kind that presses in from all sides. I'd grown accustomed, I believed, to the museum's spectral stillness, its population of silent witnesses. Midnight approached. My gaze drifted across the bank of monitors, a mosaic of static displays, until a flicker snagged my attention. Camera 4, trained on the heart of the Nile Valley collection. There, bathed in pale light, the exhibit's jewel, that lustrous alabaster urn, 4 millennia old, seemed displaced, an inch, perhaps less, westward from its established mark. A trick of the eye? Fatigue? I scrubbed tired fingers across my eyelids, rewound the digital stream. The playback was mercilessly clear. One moment, the urn stood sentinel. The next, it had subtly, undeniably migrated. A choked whisper escaped me. Impossible. That urn was dense, ancient stone, nestled within a climate-controlled, reinforced vitrine. I knew its placement intimately. Gravity, inertia, the laws of the mundane world forbade such autonomous travel. A system error, a phantom signal corrupting the feed. That had to be it. Reason dictated a physical check, though a seed of something colder, more primal, was already taking root. The corridor leading to the Egyptian wing seemed to draw the shadows deeper. An odd pressure built in the air, thick and electric, reminiscent of the charged stillness preceding a violent storm. My footsteps echoed unnervingly. At first glance through the archway, the chamber appeared undisturbed. The alabaster urn rested upon its dais, hieroglyphs tracing silent stories in the oblique illumination. Yet as I drew nearer, the icy tendril of dread tightened. The painted Ujit eye, meticulously positioned to gaze out towards the hall's center during setup, was now canted distinctly, unmistakably, towards the western wall. A tremor, cold and sharp, traced the length of my spine. My careful rationalizations crumbled. I had been so certain. The city's relentless thrum had frayed my nerves thin. My therapist prescribed silence, an escape. Online, Briarwood Manor beckoned, a Victorian phantasm of wraparound porches and spectral lace curtains billowing from open windows. Its gardens, captured in sun-dappled photographs, promised storybook serenity. Reviewers echoed the sentiment, praising the profound peace, the maternal warmth of the proprietor, a Mrs. Ashworth. Seduced by visions of quiet dawns, accompanied only by coffee steam and the rustle of turning pages, perhaps languid strolls through verdant afternoons, I surrendered and booked my retreat. It materialized before me precisely as advertised, its alabaster facade radiant under the afternoon sun. Before my hand could summon the bell, the door swung inward, revealing Mrs. Ashworth. She possessed an age that defied easy categorization, draped in a flowing garment reminiscent of eras past. Her smile radiated welcome, yet her eyes, dark, intensely focused, appraised me with a scrutiny that pricked at my composure. "Ah, Ilara, you've arrived," she murmured, her voice soft as dust motes dancing in sunbeams, ushering me across the threshold. "I've been anticipating you." The interior unfolded in a tapestry of antique splendor, albeit dense with accumulated treasures. Heavy carved furniture stood sentinel beside shelves overflowing with venerable books, while bouquets of fresh blooms spilled color from countless vases. Yet an unnerving stillness permeated the air, the suspended quietude of a museum after closing, where perfection borders on the artificial. "You are my sole guest for the weekend, my dear," Mrs. Ashworth informed me, her voice echoing slightly in the grand hallway as she guided me towards the staircase. "It has been quite bustling, but fortune grants you a tranquil interlude." She halted, pivoting to face me, her gaze unwavering. "Do you reside alone?" The abruptness of the query startled me. Yes, I do." "And is your presence here known to anyone?" Her tone remained light, conversational, yet an undercurrent resonated, raising gooseflesh along my arms. "My sister knows," I fabricated, injecting a confidence I didn't feel. "She expects to hear from me later this evening." Mrs. Ashworth inclined her head slowly, a gesture that felt less like acknowledgement and more like careful cataloging. She escorted me to my chamber, a generous corner room dominated by a majestic four-poster bed and an ornate vanity. While she detailed the breakfast schedule and the location of supplemental linens, I felt persistently observed, her eyes seemingly tracing my every flicker of expression, logging each subtle reaction. Later, ensconced in bed, I attempted to lose myself in a novel, but the house whispered its own narrative. Phantom footsteps padded softly in the corridor, floorboards groaned under unseen weight, and the faint susurrus of fabric brushed against plaster walls. Each time I peered through the keyhole or cracked open the door, only the long, tenebrous hallway greeted me, flanked by the closed doors of unoccupied rooms. Sleep must have eventually claimed me, for I surfaced abruptly to the stark digital glow of 3 a.m. Something specific had jolted me awake, though its identity remained elusive. Then, my gaze fell upon the discrepancies. My phone charger, previously tethered to the wall beside the nightstand, now lay meticulously coiled upon the distant writing desk. My suitcase, left agape on its stand, was now zipped shut, relocated to a far corner. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs. These objects had not migrated by my own hand, that much was certain. An intruder, someone possessing access, had shared my room while I slept. Scrambling from bed, I verified the lock. It was securely fastened, yet the confirmation offered scant comfort. A key existed. Sleep became an impossibility. I retreated to the armchair by the window, a sentinel watching the unyielding door, listening to the ancient house sigh and settle around me through the remaining hours of darkness. At breakfast, Mrs. Ashworth presented a facade of perfect normalcy. Coffee poured, homemade scones were offered, accompanied by cheerful anecdotes about Briarwood Manor's storied past. I rehearsed my confrontation, poised to inquire about the nocturnal rearrangement, but each attempt was deftly parried. She'd pivot smoothly, remarking on the shifting weather patterns or posing disconcertingly intimate questions about my life far removed from this place. The second night, I established my own silent testament. Each item in the room was positioned with deliberate intent. My tortoiseshell hairbrush angled just so upon the vanity's polished surface, my walking shoes aligned with geometric precision, pointing directly towards the door. I documented the arrangement with my phone's camera, needing tangible proof should the subtle violations recur. Departure seemed the logical course, yet a confluence of curiosity, obstinance, and perhaps the simple, mortifying shame of being unnerved by an elderly woman and mysteriously migrating belongings anchored me there. It was the scratching that woke me, a faint, insistent scrape emanating from the hallway, drawing inexorably closer. I lay utterly immobile, my breath caught, heart battering my sternum as the sound reached my threshold. Then the delicate, metallic snick of a key turning in the lock. My eyelids fluttered nearly closed, affording only a sliver of vision through the veil of my lashes. Silently, the door drifted open. Mrs. Ashworth slipped inside. Bathed in the hallway's dim luminescence, she seemed altered, her movements possessing a fluid grace incongruous with her apparent years. Her head tilted at an angle that felt disturbingly unnatural as she scanned the room. Her attention fell first upon my suitcase. She unzipped it with painstaking care, her fingers exploring my belongings, not with the haste of a thief, but with the meticulous curiosity of an archivist, examining each folded garment, each small necessity, before returning it precisely to its former place. From there, she glided to the vanity. She lifted my hairbrush, her gaze fixated on the few strands entangled in its bristles. Raising it towards her face, she inhaled deeply, and I could have sworn she was scenting my very essence. A scream gathered in my throat, a desperate urge to leap up, to shatter the horrifying tableau, but profound fear rendered me inert, a statue carved from dread. Was this truly unfolding, a waking nightmare? The terror electrifying my veins screamed its authenticity. She drifted nearer the bed. I forced my breathing into a slow, even rhythm, mimicking slumber. For an eternity, it seemed, she stood motionless beside me, simply observing. Then, her hand extended, cool fingers brushing the pillow mere inches from my temple, grazing the tips of my hair. An involuntary flinch rippled through me. Her hand retracted instantly. Without a sound, ethereal and silent, she receded from the room. The lock clicked shut, sealing her departure. Before the echo of her phantom footsteps faded completely, I was out of bed, packing with frantic haste. The lateness of the hour, the unpaid balance for the night, none of it mattered. Escape was the only imperative. Suitcase bumping against my legs, I crept down the main staircase into the oppressive darkness of the lower floor. From the Stygian gloom of the living room, her voice emerged, smooth as aged velvet. "Leaving so soon, Ilara?" She materialized in a rocking chair, nestled in a deep corner, a silhouette barely discernible. No lamps were lit. I don't feel well," I stammered, the lie flimsy on my tongue. "I think it best I return home. But I have so enjoyed observing your slumber," she replied, her voice taking on a dreamy, faraway quality. "It has been an age since I hosted a guest who sleeps with such profound peace." Panic propelled me through the front door, across the porch, fumbling desperately for my car keys. A backward glance revealed Mrs. Ashworth standing framed in the doorway, her body executing a gentle, rhythmic rocking motion despite the absence of any chair beneath her. I drove without pause, navigating a blur of back roads and anonymous highways, velocity my sole objective. Crossing the threshold of my own apartment felt like surfacing from a suffocating depth. The ensuing shower was scalding, protracted, a ritual cleansing meant to exorcise the lingering sensation of being watched. Later, attempting to post a warning about Briarwood Manor, I scoured the internet in vain. The listing, the reviews, the photographs, all had evaporated, leaving no digital trace, as if the entire episode had been conjured from my own frayed psyche. Occasionally, doubt whispers. Perhaps it was merely stress, an overwrought imagination. But then, unpacking a bag from some subsequent trip, a fugitive scent will rise. Dried flowers, old lace, and something else, something fundamentally wrong, and the memory solidifies. Mrs. Ashworth, standing sentinel in the dimness of my room, her gaze fixed upon my sleeping form. Weekend excursions still happen, but now I favor the sterile anonymity of chain hotels, places secured by impersonal key cards, bustling with the reassuring presence of other travelers. And always, always, I test the deadbolt, ensuring it slides firmly home from the inside. The first inkling of discordance regarding the spare room manifested on an unremarkable Tuesday evening. Passing its closed door, Elias felt an abrupt magnetic compulsion to peer inside. No discernible sound provoked it, simply a halt in the corridor, his gaze fixed on the unassuming panel drawn by an invisible tether. He entered, bathing the space in sterile overhead light. The room presented its usual tableau: a bed swathed in disuse, a squat mahogany bureau, the dense obsidian folds of drapery cloaking the window. Yet, an impalpable tension saturated the air, a static charge against the skin. He lingered, expectant, waiting for the source of his intuition's alarm, but silence reigned. With a sigh that felt inadequate, he extinguished the light, secured the door, and presumed the fleeting oddity concluded. Merely days later, Elias returned, seeking a forgotten valise stored within the bureau's depths. It was then he observed the curtains. A faint, inexplicable tremor disturbed their heavy velvet. They swayed, a languid undulation, though the window behind remained firmly shut, no draft from vent nor climate control to account for the motion. He watched, mesmerized by the slow, deliberate shifting. For a fleeting instant, the shadowed pleats converged, sculpting something akin to a leer, a wide, unsettling curve that mimicked mirth. Elias narrowed his eyes, scrubbing at them as if to clear a phantasm. Stepping closer, fingers poised to wrench the fabric aside, he grasped the material. But behind the parted velvet lay only the impassive glass, securely latched. A peculiar frost traced his nape. His gaze swept the room's quiet corners before he inhaled sharply, attempting to anchor himself with logic, patterns in the cloth, tricks of the eye. Releasing the velvet, he retrieved his luggage and departed, the sensation lingering. That night, the ritual of brushing his teeth became haunted. Behind closed eyelids, the phantom smile persisted, superimposed on mundane thoughts of morning obligations and outstanding accounts. The image clung, tenacious. Sleep, usually a swift surrender, proved elusive. An amorphous disquiet settled over him as he finally succumbed to darkness. By morning's light, the incident had been relegated to the realm of overwrought imagination, or so Elias tried to persuade himself. The day unfolded with comforting normalcy. Work, dinner, television, a rhythm undisturbed, until, navigating the hallway toward slumber, he passed the spare room door and felt it anew. That same subtle summons, as if the room itself possessed a low, insistent voice. He yielded. Flicking the switch, he confronted the curtains. They hung immobile, ponderous, radiating a stillness that seemed absolute, eternal. He waited, poised in the doorway. Nothing stirred. Shrugging off a wave of foolishness, he plunged the room back into darkness and withdrew. Yet hours later, slumber was violently interrupted. Something intangible had clawed him back to consciousness. Sitting bolt upright, Elias listened. The house was submerged in profound silence, the kind that blankets the world in the deepest hours. He padded into the hallway. A faint, incongruous sliver of light bled from beneath the spare room door. He never left that light burning. His pulse quickened, a frantic bird trapped in his chest. A tremor began in his hands, and the doorknob felt unnaturally cold beneath his touch. He pushed the door inward. The overhead fixture was dark, yet an ambient luminescence filtered through the window, perhaps from a distant street lamp. The curtains, which he meticulously kept drawn, were now parted down the middle, hanging slightly ajar, a state they never maintained on their own. And they were moving again, a gentle back and forth cadence, as if an unseen hand played behind them. A tingling current shot up his spine, his stomach clenched, heart thudding against his ribs. He advanced, snatching at one side of the heavy fabric. He yanked it aside swiftly, half expecting to reveal something, but there was only the sealed window pane. No infiltrating air, no breeze, nothing. The wrongness of it was visceral. His arms vibrated as he released the velvet, stumbling back a step. Cold perspiration beaded on his brow, his breathing rapid and shallow. Retreating from the room, he instinctively flipped the light switch, which clicked off, revealing it had somehow been on, despite his certainty otherwise, and pulled the door shut. He stood in the hallway, gulping air, striving for composure. Then, retreating to his own bedroom, he turned the lock. Sleep remained a distant shore for hours, his mind replaying the impossible motion, the phantom light, the pervasive sense of violation. Had he forgotten the curtains, misremembered the switch? Rationality offered flimsy shields against the encroaching dread. The subsequent days saw Elias actively circumventing the spare room. The prospect of witnessing that animate fabric, the suggestion of that grotesque smile, filled him with a primal aversion. He clung to routine, work, errands, the flickering blue light of the television. But the hallway passage became a trial. Each transit brought a familiar pressure to his chest. His eyes would dart involuntarily towards the door, and sometimes, straining his ears, he fancied he heard it, a soft, susurrant rustle from within. He dismissed it as the house settling, the wind's complaint, yet the wind was often absent, and the house's usual groans bore no resemblance to this silken whisper. One evening, resolve hardening, Elias decided on confrontation. Armed with a heavy flashlight, he marched into the guest room. He activated the overhead light, supplementing it with the flashlight's focused beam, probing every nook, every shadow. He manhandled the bureau aside, searching for hidden vents or insidious drafts. Nothing. He scrutinized the windowsill, tracing its edges, testing the latch. Locked, airtight, impeccable. The sole anomaly remained the curtain itself. His fingers brushed the velvet. It felt unnervingly cool, as if briefly stored in a mortuary drawer, despite the ambient room temperature. He rubbed the nap between thumb and forefinger, seeking moisture, finding none, just that inexplicable, penetrating cold. After a moment, bewildered, he let the fabric fall and exited, securing the door, feeling more adrift than before. Later, deep in the night, near the 2 o'clock hour, wakefulness claimed him once more. The corridor outside his bedroom seemed steeped in an unusual blackness. The small nightlight near the bathroom, a constant beacon, was extinguished. A dead bulb, perhaps, or perhaps not. Gripping his phone, its screen casting pallid, spectral light, he stepped into the hall. He stood frozen, gaze locked on the spare room door. His pulse throbbed, an insistent drumbeat in his ears. Then, cutting through to silence the sound, faint, distinct, the unmistakable caress of fabric on fabric. He crept forward, pressing his ear to the cool wood. The rustling persisted, a gentle, rhythmic friction, like someone leisurely stroking the curtains. Back and forth, back and forth. His heart hammered violently, threatening to splinter his ribs. He had to know. His hand, slick with sweat and trembling, turned the knob. Inside, darkness reigned, save for the faint exterior glow. The curtains were flung wide open. The window remained sealed, inviolate, yet the heavy velvet panels billowed with a serene, steady rhythm, possessed by an internal volition. Elias swallowed against a throat gone painfully dry. He advanced towards the window. The inner corners of the fabric curled upwards, pulling taut, unmistakably forming that macabre crescent again. The grin. It seemed wider now, more pronounced, as if it had fed and grown in the intervening days. The edges stretched, suggesting spectral cheekbones. Shock rendered him immobile for a stretched second. Then, galvanized by terror, he lunged, seizing the curtain with both hands, attempting to smooth it flat, to force stillness upon it. The material resisted, slithering through his grasp as if propelled by a gentle, insistent force from behind. He wrestled with it, trying to impose order, but it lifted slightly, brushing against his forearms with a silken touch that felt horribly intimate. He recoiled, eyes riveted to the undulating fabric. The fine hairs on his arms prickled. His breath came in shallow gasps. He tried invoking reason, temperature fluctuations, minute air currents, but the locked window mocked his efforts. Something unseen, unfelt, was manipulating the velvet. His frantic gaze scanned the room. The bed stood silent sentinel, the walls impassive. Only the curtains pulsed with this unnatural life. Enough, he would remove them entirely. Dragging a nearby chair beneath the curtain rod, Elias climbed onto its unsteady surface. His hands shook as he reached for the top edge, fumbling with the metal rings. He tugged, the hooks releasing with small, sharp clicks. The curtain writhed again, a final caress against his arms, a soft defiance. His legs felt watery. Ring by stubborn ring, he wrestled the heavy panel free until it collapsed from the rod. Scrambling down, he flung the liberated velvet onto the bed. He stepped back, panting, staring at the naked window. The night outside was a simple void, punctuated by the faraway street lamp. Sweat plastered his hair to his temples. His heart galloped, but a sliver of relief penetrated the fear. There, he thought. It's done, gone. He bundled the offending fabric into a plastic sack, deposited it in the hallway, and firmly closed the spare room door. The following day, Elias visited a department store, purchasing new curtains, different shade, different weave, utterly untainted. He installed them that afternoon, a faint sense of absurdity accompanying the task. An overactive imagination, surely. Perhaps the old material was flawed, the rod improperly balanced. Whatever the mundane explanation, the matter, he assured himself, was concluded. That night, however, lying in bed, a familiar knot tightened in his stomach. The conviction that something remained profoundly wrong refused to dissipate. Around midnight, a sound prized him from the edge of sleep. Not rustling this time, but a distinct wooden creak, like a protesting hinge. He rose, heart already beginning its frantic tattoo, and moved to the hallway. The spare room door stood ajar. He knew, with chilling certainty, he had closed it. He always closed it now. He stood at the threshold, peering into the unlit space. The new curtains were drawn shut. Reaching for the switch, his fingers met unresponsive plastic. The light remained dead. Bulb failure, or something else entirely. He raised his phone, its beam cutting a shaky path through the gloom. The new curtains were swaying, a gentle oscillation, yet undeniable. No open window, no fan, no earthly reason. Still, they moved. Nausea churned within him. His breathing grew ragged. He approached the window incrementally, his palms slick. The new fabric shifted side to side, caught in that same languid, horrifying rhythm. Then suddenly, the folds near the center began to gather. He watched, transfixed in horror, as they puckered, tightened, coalescing into a smaller, nascent version of the grin he thought he'd banished. A profound, bone-deep cold seized him. He wanted to tear them down again, violently, but paralysis held him fast. He could only stand witness as the unnatural smile curled upon itself, deepening, widening, a slight convexity pushing forward, as if something pressed against the material, yearning to emerge. His throat constricted, breath hitched, fear threatened to suffocate him. At last, instinct overrode paralysis. He surged forward, grabbing the center of the curtain panels with both hands and yanking downwards with all his strength. The rod tore from the wall with a sickening crack, the fabric collapsing in his fists. He stumbled backward, colliding sharply with the bureau, nearly losing his footing. The curtains spilled onto the floor. His phone's beam danced wildly across the room as his hand shook uncontrollably. The broken rod clattered against a hardwood, the sound echoing in the sudden charged silence. He fled into the hallway, slamming the guest room door shut, fumbling with the lock until it clicked home. His entire frame shuddered with violent tremors. There was no denying it now. Something resided in that room. Its nature remained opaque, terrifyingly so, but its reality, or the reality of his perception of it, was absolute. The remainder of the night Elias spent huddled in the living room, every light ablaze, jumping at each nocturnal creak and sigh of the house. When dawn finally broke, painting the windows gray, he rose stiffly. He approached the guest room door, listened intently. Silence. He opened it a mere fraction. Hallway lights slanted into the room. The new curtains lay in a tangled heap on the floor amidst the splintered remains of the rod. Nothing else appeared disturbed. The window remained locked. He entered cautiously, inhaling. The air felt dense, stagnant, almost suffocating. He gathered the ruined curtains, shoving them into the plastic bag alongside their predecessors, knotting the top securely. He hasn't attempted to hang anything over that window since. The blinds stay lowered, but the window itself remains starkly bare. At night, muffled sounds still sometimes emanate from behind the closed door. Passing by, Elias occasionally imagines he sees the blinds quiver, but the will to investigate has deserted him, replaced by a profound dread. Better, he reasons, to leave it undisturbed. Answers hold little appeal when the questions themselves are steeped in such terror. He knows only this. The room remains, a malignant presence within his own home, perpetually quarantined. He tries to ignore it, to hope the subtle agitations will cease, that the memory of the shape will eventually blur and fade. Yet every time he walks that stretch of hallway, a leaden weight settles in his gut, an internal certainty that the shape is still there, behind the door, behind the blinds, patiently waiting. And that certainty is more than enough to ensure he never sleeps in there, never hangs another curtain, never truly feels at peace in his own house again. Never had I conceived that my own face, cast back by polished glass, could become an instrument of betrayal. Yet there I stood, Elias Thorne, transfixed before the bathroom mirror, watching in abject horror as the image tethered to my reality warped into something utterly other, a grotesque mockery that pulsed where my reflection should have been. It commenced on a Tuesday, unremarkable save for the suffocating humidity clinging to the city air. My morning ritual unfolded with practiced economy, the hiss of the shower, the scrape of the razor, the minty foam of toothpaste. Time, however, proved a less cooperative partner, urging me faster. I was a blur of motion, barely acknowledging the man in the mirror until a flicker, a peripheral wrongness, snagged my attention. Toothbrush dangling, I pivoted. For a suspended heartbeat, normalcy reigned. Elias Thorne, damp-haired, flecked with paste. Then the shift, subtle, insidious, a lag in the mirrored movement, a phantom delay trailing my own. A blink, initiated by me, echoed a fraction too late from the glass. My hand rose, slicing the air. Its counterpart followed, but with a stuttering, digitized quality, like flawed projection. Eyes traced my vertebrae. Mirrors don't glitch. Fatigue, I reasoned desperately, must be gnawing deeper than I knew. I rinsed, splashed frigid water onto my face, snatched my keys, and fled the unsettling stillness of the bathroom. The workday dissolved into a haze of distraction, my thoughts orbiting that disquieting bathroom tableau. By evening's return, the conviction that I'd merely succumbed to stress had almost taken root. Almost. The hallway mirror intercepted me as I entered my apartment. I froze, key biting into my palm, the face swimming in the silvered depths, undeniably mine, yet fundamentally alien. Where my features registered shock, a burgeoning terror, the simulacrum offered a sly, knowing smirk, drenched in malice. A strangled gasp escaped me as I stumbled backward, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Impossible. Reflections obeyed. They mimicked. They did not initiate, yet this one did. Before my paralyzed gaze, its hand lifted in a cheerful, almost Jonadic wave, a gesture utterly discordant with the ice flooding my veins. I bolted down the hall, into the bedroom, the slam of the door a pathetic shield. Perched on the bed's edge, tremors racking my hands, I scrabbled for logic. Stress, exhaustion, a brewing sickness, anything but the chilling truth, whispering from the reflective surfaces of my life. The subsequent days bled into a paranoid fugue state. Mirrors became portals to subtle dread. Avoiding them proved a futile exercise. They lurked everywhere, The car's rear view, the impassive gleam of windows, the polished steel of kitchen appliances. Each glance risked revealing the other Elias, the one whose movements were fractionally off, whose features sometimes blurred into unsettling suggestions. Once, passing a darkened shop front, my reflection strode confidently in the opposite direction, glancing back over its shoulder with a predatory grin that burrowed under my skin. Solitude became my sanctuary, mirrors draped in sheets, the phone's forward-facing eye blinded by tape. But the wrongness seeped through the barricades, a pervasive stain on reality's fabric. Sleep offered no escape, haunted by that distorted visage, that smile that was mine and yet profoundly not. Sanity frayed. Was this real? Was I real? After a week suspended in this waking nightmare, the tension became unbearable. Answers were needed, understanding paramount. Thus, defying every primal instinct screaming retreat, I resolved to confront the source. Back in the bathroom, hand trembling, I gripped the cool porcelain of the sink. Slowly, agonizingly, I peeled back the shroud from the mirror. Silence. My own face stared back, pale, haggard, underscored by the bruised shadows of sleeplessness. Mundane, familiar, just Elias in the glass. And then it ruptured. The reflection writhed. Features flowed like hot wax, rearranging into an architecture of nightmare. Eyes ballooned into obsidian voids within a face shedding its humanity with terrifying speed. A scream built in my throat, but paralysis held me fast, a spectator to my own unraveling. Then the thing in the glass spoke. Elias, it resonated, a voice both mine and chillingly alien, seeming to emanate from the very air around me. We have awaited this convergence for so long. What are you? The words scraped past the constriction in my throat. A smile split the monstrous face, impossibly wide, horrifically elastic. We are you, Elias, or rather, the potential of you, the should of you. I don't understand, I whispered, the floor seeming to tilt beneath me. Naturally, the voice dripped condescension. Your singular existence is confining, but we perceive the spectrum, every branching possibility, every iteration of Elias Thorn, and we have selected you for integration. A glacial dread solidified in my gut. Integration? What does that mean? The grin stretched further, threatening to unhinge. Emancipation, apotheosis, transcendence beyond your fragile imaginings. As it spoke, an unseen current tugged at me, a psychic undertow pulling me towards the glass. My knuckles whitened on the sink's edge as I fought the invisible tether. No, the word tore from me, sharp with unexpected resolve. I reject that. I won't become whatever you are. The thing's face contorted, rage twisting the already monstrous features into a mask of pure fury. Choice is an illusion, it hissed, the sound scraping like metal on stone. The assimilation has begun. You will join us. The pull intensified, relentless, dragging me forward, my shoes skidding on the tiles. Panic surged, overriding paralysis. Releasing the sink, I flung my fist forward with every ounce of terror-fueled strength I possessed. Glass exploded outwards in a crystalline spray. Shards rained down, biting into my hand, my arm, painting the porcelain with crimson blooms. But the pain was secondary. The pulling ceased. The voice vanished. I collapsed to the floor amidst the glittering debris, breath tearing through my lungs in ragged gasps, shaking violently, bleeding, but blessedly singular, still Elias, still tethered to this reality. In the ensuing days, every mirror vanished from my apartment. Reflective surfaces became zones of cautious aversion. I assured myself the ordeal was concluded, the victory mine. Yet sometimes, a fleeting movement catches my eye in the dark sheen of a window pane, a rain-slicked streets, and for a chilling instant, I see it, that distorted face, those abyssal eyes returning my gaze. Did I truly sever the connection, or does it linger still, patient, waiting on the other side of the looking glass for its moment? Certainty eludes me. I know only this. My own reflection is forever tainted, a reminder that the most terrifying visages are sometimes our own, staring back from a world just beyond the silver. Tuesday delivered the violation. A plain manila shroud, anonymous, slipped beneath the door. Inside, a stark Polaroid, my own sleeping form, vulnerable beneath the duvet. The stillness of the image screamed a truth the house's silence had masked. This vigil wasn't solitary. Eyes were upon me. Peril wasn't listed in the house-sitting brief. It promised sanctuary, a reprieve from the city's insistent pulse, the confines of my rented shoebox. Leo, a friend tethered to me by shared university follies, had inherited this behemoth, a brooding Victorian pile perched on a windswept hill, bequeathed by his grandmother. He needed a custodian while navigating the labyrinth of probate. "Think of it, Ilara," he'd urged, pressing the cold brass keys into my palm. Absolute stillness, vistas that stretch forever. Maybe that magnum opus you keep threatening will finally breathe. The proposition shimmered, a month cocooned in rural splendor, just the rustle of pages and the sigh of the wind for company. An idyll. The initial days unfolded like a dream. A rhythm established itself. Mornings surrendered to the unfolding narrative on my screen. Afternoons lost wandering the estate's sprawling, untamed acres. Evenings spent nestled fireside, pages turning in the amber glow. The house sighed around me, a symphony of aged timber groaning, latches refusing perfect closure, casements trembling against the breeze. These eccentricities felt like endearments. Night 8 fractured the peace. A muffled impact resonated from the upper floor, the distinct punctuation of something solid meeting wood. I became utterly still, the novel sliding from my grasp, every nerve straining against the profound quiet. Silence stretched taut, and then, unmistakable, footfalls overhead, deliberate treads across the landing. My pulse surged, this a frantic drum against the ribs, alone. Leo's assurance echoed. "No other keys, Ilara. The place is yours entirely." But the floorboards above disagreed. The hearth yielded a heavy iron poker. Cold comfort clutched tight. I advanced toward the grand staircase, each footstep amplifying the ancient wood's complaints into thunderclaps in the stillness. "Is anyone there?" The words, meant to project confidence, quavered. Only the vast, listening silence answered. Ascending felt like wading through treacle, the poker a clumsy talisman in my slick palm. At landing, I held my breath. Emptiness. Room by room, I banished shadows with electric light, peering into wardrobes deep enough to swallow secrets, beneath dust-ruffled bedsteads. Nothing. A shaky laugh escaped me. Absurd. Just the groans of an old structure settling its bones, surely. An overactive imagination, fueled by solitude. Yet retreating to the dubious safety of my bed, a disquiet lingered, a prickling certainty that the emptiness was occupied. Days trickled by under a veneer of normalcy. I plunged into my manuscript, seeking refuge in fiction from the non-fiction dread that had taken root. But the house's every sigh became a potential footstep, its groans sinister whispers. My own shadow startled me. Then the envelope, lodged beneath the front door like a delivered verdict. No postmark, no sender, just my name, Alara, scrawled in a jagged script. Inside, the Polaroid, dim, speckled yet brutally clear, me, oblivious in sleep, framed by the bedroom doorway. An icy current traced my spine. This wasn't fancy. This was violation. Someone had stood there, watching. My fingers trembled, dialing Leo's number. "Are you absolutely certain?" I began, striving for composure, "that no one else could possibly get in?" His voice came back, confident, dismissive of my rising panic. "Categorically, Ilara. Gran was obsessive about security near the end. New locks everywhere. My set, the only set, is with you." His certainty felt hollow against the tangible proof clutched in my hand. That evening became a ritual of fortification. Bolts thrown, sashes latched, windows secured again and again. A cumbersome antique armoire groaned in protest as I wrestled it before my bedroom door. The poker lay beside my pillow, a cold bedfellow. Sleep became a shallow, treacherous pool, disturbed by every creak, every fleeting shadow morphing into menace. Dawn brought another offering. This time, me captured mid-sentence at the laptop, the image framed by the mullioned panes of the study window. A call to the constabulary yielded little solace. Their tone dripped with weary skepticism. No broken locks, nothing missing. Probably bored local youths, they surmised. Patrols would be more vigilant, a vague promise that evaporated into the indifferent country air. But I knew this wasn't mischief, it was obsession. The Polaroids became a daily torment. Ilara browsing the leather-bound spines in the library. Ilara stirring soup at the stove. Ilara gazing out into the encroaching dusk. The house transformed from sanctuary to cage. Curtains remained drawn, shrouding the rooms in perpetual twilight. I pleaded with Leo across the crackling international line, begged release from this vigil, but bureaucratic tangles held him fast in Europe. "Just another week, Ilara, hang on." A week felt like an eternity under unseen scrutiny. So I endured, each hour tightening the knot of anxiety in my gut. Sleep became a fractured landscape, punctuated by the jangle of my crude alarms, tin cans strung like macabre decorations near doors and windows. It was during one such shallow dive into unconsciousness that the sound sliced through the quiet, the distinct, delicate snick of a camera shutter. My eyelids snapped open, but instinct screamed stillness. I regulated my breath, feigning sleep. There, a silhouette etched against the lesser dark of the hallway, framed perfectly in my bedroom doorway. A cold wave of paralysis washed over me. A scream lodged useless in my throat. Movement froze. My heart hammered against my ribs as the shape lifted an object. The camera. Once more. Snick. The sound broke the spell. Fury surged, eclipsing fear. I exploded from the bed, the poker arcing through the air. The figure recoiled with startling agility, melting back into the corridor. Adrenaline fueled my pursuit. Enough. This siege had to break. Down the echoing stairwell we flew, my pursuer swift, but my knowledge of the house's twists proving decisive. A stumble on the lower steps, my chance. I drove them onward, finally trapping them amidst the towering bookshelves of the library. Who are you? The demand ripped from my throat, the poker held like a sword. What do you want? The figure pivoted. Through the gloom, pierced by slivers of moonlight bleeding past the heavy drapes, features resolved. A woman, perhaps 60, maybe older, crowned with a Medusa tangle of silver hair. Her eyes, though, were what held me, blazing with a fierce, unhallowed light. My house, she rasped, the sound like dry leaves skittering over stone. You have no right, none of you. A jolt, sharp as electricity. The faded photographs scattered through the rooms, faces from another time. Leo's grandmother. Agnes? The name escaped me, a mere breath. Leo's grandmother? But you died. A crackle of laughter, brittle and devoid of mirth. Dead? Is that the story they spun? Convenient? Her voice sharpened. They tried to bury me early, tuck me away in one of their sterile boxes, whispered I was mad. A flicker of cunning in those burning eyes. But I endured. I watched from the shadows. This place is mine. Mine. My thoughts spun. Leo hadn't known, or had he lied? This woman, Agnes, was undeniably present, fiercely alive, yet fractured. Agnes, I attempted, modulating my tone, seeking reason in the face of delusion. I'm not trying to take anything. Leo asked me to look after the place. Your grandson. Liar. The word was a projectile. All of you, scheming to usurp what is mine. But I protect my own. I drove the others away. I'll drive you out too. She launched herself at me, a wiry bundle of surprising force. I sidestepped, but the poker clattered from my grasp. We collided, stumbling against venerable oak shelves, sending books cascading. Age hadn't diminished her strength, amplified as it was by a potent cocktail of paranoia and fury. But youth and the sheer terror of the situation lent me an unexpected resilience. We wrestled amidst the fallen literature until, finally, I gained the upper hand, pinning her slight frame beneath me. She thrashed, spit in curses and pleas. I'm sorry, I gasped, the words ragged. Truly sorry, but it stops now. Time blurred as I held her captive, her struggles oscillating between venomous threats and desperate whimpers, until sheer weariness finally claimed her, pulling her into a twitching, uneasy slumber. My hands still shook as I dialed first the police, then Leo. The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting montage. Uniformed officers, hushed paramedics, the quiet removal of Agnes, still muttering fiercely about trespassers. Leo arrived later, his face a mask of disbelief and contrition. Alara, God, I'm sorry. he repeated, the words inadequate. We thought. The hospice reported she'd gone peacefully. We held a service. The fragmented truth pieced itself together. Agnes, diagnosed with profound paranoia, institutionalized. She had orchestrated an elaborate escape, faking her demise, returning to the only place she recognized as hers. She'd been dwelling within the house's secret arteries, forgotten passages, walled-off spaces unknown even to Leo, a phantom limb clinging to its host. I departed that same afternoon, the house receding behind me like a bad dream, though its chill lingered deep in my bones. Leo's apologies and offers of recompense felt distant, irrelevant. Escape was the only currency I valued. Years have passed. The sharp edges have blurred, yet sleep still sometimes brings the watchers, the phantom clicks, the certainty of unseen eyes boring into me from the periphery. Solitude is no longer a comfort. I never accepted another house-sitting assignment, never again willingly slept alone in an unfamiliar place, because the true horror wasn't the unknown lurking in the shadows. It was the realization that the monster wasn't an invader at all, but an occupant, hidden in plain sight, patient and vigilant within the very walls meant to shield you. Two hours past midnight, under the sterile hum of the starlight oasis's fluorescent tubes, the night began its slow unraveling. I was adrift in the worn pages of a novel, the silence punctuated only by the electric buzz when the door's chime fractured the quiet. That sound, innocuous usually, heralded the arrival of figures who would warp the mundane solitude of my shift into a lingering phantasm. For half a year, this isolated outpost had been my nocturnal domain. A soul-numbing vigil, yes, but it kept the wolves from the door and granted boundless hours for literary escape. Typically, the night offered only spectral visitors, weary haulers seeking caffeine salvation, disoriented travelers needing coordinates. Initially, this particular Tuesday bled into the familiar pattern. My gaze lifted from the text to find four shadows detaching themselves from the exterior gloom and slipping inside. 3 men, 1 woman, an incongruous assembly, far removed from the usual procession of truckers and wanderers. Clad uniformly in dark attire, they possessed a coordinated, almost predatory grace that coiled unease deep within my gut. "Welcome," I managed, the words striving for casual warmth. "Just so you're aware, we lock up in 15 minutes. The woman pivoted towards me. A smile ghosted her lips, a chillingly vacant gesture that failed to ignite any warmth in her eyes. "Oh, pay us no mind," she murmured, her voice smooth as riverstone. "Our business here is brief." They dispersed, melting into the aisles like smoke, each claiming a separate corridor of brightly lit merchandise. My attention fractured, trying to track their disparate movements through the convex distortions of the security mirrors. A prickling certainty grew. This was no ordinary stop. Time bled past the quarter-hour mark, yet they lingered, their actions devoid of consumer intent. Items lifted, examined, replaced. Hushed conferences conducted just beyond earshot. 2:15, official closing. A nervous cough scraped my throat. Apologies, folks, but the Starlight Oasis is now closed. I'll need you to bring your selections to the counter. From the shadows emerged the most imposing of the men, Kyle, his features obscured by the downward tilt of a dark cap brim. Our browsing isn't concluded, he stated, his voice a low rasp of gravel. Perhaps you could extend your hours for us. Ice traced its path along my vertebrae. This wasn't suggestion, it was decree. I lack the authority, I stammered. Policy dictates my employment. He closed the distance between us, the acrid scent of stale cigarette smoke preceding him. Listen closely, he breathed, the intimacy terrifying. We are remaining. You are making no calls. Understood? The frantic drumming in my chest felt loud enough to betray me. A mute nod was my only possible reply. He retreated slightly, a phantom satisfaction in his posture. Excellent. Resume your reading. Erase our presence from your mind. An impossible command. 4 strangers held my small fluorescent world captive, and I, its sole guardian, was utterly disarmed. Beneath the counter, the cool plastic of the panic button beckoned, a desperate, silent scream. Yet his words, "You are making no calls," echoed like a physical barrier. Had they anticipated even this? Was my every tremor observed? Time dilated, stretching the subsequent hours into an eternity of strained silence and suppressed panic. The quartet drifted through the aisles in their unsettling ballet, punctuated by whispered exchanges or prolonged, unnerving stillness. Sporadically, one would surface at the counter, a request for cigarettes, a demand to unlock the chilled beer cabinet. Each time I obeyed, my fingers fumbling with the keys, betraying the tremor that had taken root deep inside. 3 o'clock bled into 4. 4 relinquished its hold to 5. The question hammered relentlessly. What purpose held them here? It wasn't robbery, not in the conventional sense. The till remained untouched, the safe unmolested. They were suspended in anticipation, waiting. But for what? Sometime in the spectral hours before dawn, the woman, Lyra, materialized before the counter. Unlike her companions, her gaze met mine directly, unsettlingly perceptive. "Your name?" she inquired, her voice softer now, almost intimate. Silas. The name escaped my lips, thin and reedy. A smile touched her features again, this time tinged with something akin to melancholy recognition. "Silas?" she echoed, savoring the syllables. "Tell me, Silas, are you acquainted with the concept of destiny?" The question ambushed me. I blinked, momentarily adrift. I can't say I've given it much thought. She leaned forward, her eyes holding mine captive. "Perhaps it's time you did. Destiny orchestrated this convergence, Silas. Our presence here, your presence, this station, this specific rotation of the earth. A fresh wave of cold washed over me. What are you implying? Her smile deepened, enigmatic, before she turned and dissolved back into the store's geography, leaving me floundering in a sea of amplified dread and confusion. A pale, hesitant luminescence began to stain the eastern horizon, dawn's first fragile infiltration. Simultaneously, the low growl of an engine reached my ears. A surge of frantic hope, rescue, a routine police patrol, crested and broke almost instantly. A hulking black SUV, its windows opaque shields against the nascent light, glided to a halt beside the pumps. From it emerged a figure in a meticulously tailored suit, Mr. Thorne, moving with an air of absolute command. He entered the starlight oasis as if traversing his own foyer, acknowledging the four occupants with a subtle inclination of his head. "Is the hour upon us?" Cale inquired. The newcomer affirmed with a curt nod. "The hour is upon us. Your vigil was satisfactory." Abruptly, the strange stasis ended. They moved towards the exit in unison. At the threshold, Lyra paused, her gaze finding mine one last time across the space. "Hold fast to my words, Silas, regarding destiny. Tonight, merely the prologue." Then she too was gone, swallowed by the obsidian vehicle, which promptly whispered away into the gray morning, leaving behind an unnerving vacuum. I remained rooted behind the counter, adrift in the wake of their departure. Time seemed to have fractured. A glance at the wall clock confirmed the impossible. 6 o'clock, the precise end of my shift. As if summoned by the hour itself, Marco, my relief, ambled in, whistling softly. His cheerfulness faltered as he registered my pallor, the tremor still subtly vibrating through me. "Whoa, Silas. Looks like you wrestled the graveyard shift and lost," he observed, frowning slightly. Words formed, a torrent of disbelief and terror wanting release, but they dissolved unspoken. How could I articulate the intangible menace, the hours held hostage by enigma? What proof existed beyond my own frayed nerves? "Yeah," I heard myself say, the word tasting like ash. "Long night, Marco. Long night." Collecting my meager belongings, I retreated from the starlight oasis, my thoughts a chaotic storm. Lyra's pronouncements, destiny, prologue, reverberated, refusing to be silenced. What intricate design had ensnared me? In the ensuing weeks, I became a frantic scavenger of news reports, searching for ripples, for any anomaly that might connect to that spectral occupation. Silence. The world continued its relentless, oblivious rotation, yet the night remained indelibly etched onto my psyche. It lived in the heightened startle reflex to the chime of the door, the suspicious scrutiny I now cast upon every face entering my fluorescent domain. Precisely 1 month after the visitation, arriving for my shift, I discovered an unmarked envelope tucked beneath my usual stack of paperwork. Inside lay a single, stark white card bearing an address, a designated hour, and 5 words that instantly turned my blood to ice. "The next phase begins now." I stood frozen, the card radiating a chilling significance in my hand. A primal instinct screamed for denial, urged me to discard the summons, to retreat back into the comforting anonymity of my former existence. yet a deeper, more insistent current pulled me forward, an undeniable certainty that escape was illusory. The strange currents set in motion within the starlight oasis that night were far from settled, and I, Silas, for reasons utterly opaque, was caught in their flow. Slipping the card into my pocket felt like crossing an invisible threshold. My world, once circumscribed by the predictable rhythm of late-night shifts and borrowed narratives, had fractured irrevocably. Ahead stretched an unmapped territory, shadowed, perhaps perilous, undeniably intertwined with the threads of destiny Lyra had spoken of. I didn't possess the map, nor comprehend the destination, but recalling her final, haunting gaze, I knew, with a certainty that both terrified and exhilarated, that I was irrevocably bound to discover it. The ordinary was extinguished. The extraordinary, in all its unnerving potential, had just commenced. The instant we trespassed upon Ethelgard, a profound wrongness settled in my gut. Their smiles stretched like painted masks across unfamiliar faces, the welcomes effusive to the point of suffocation. As twilight bled purple and bruised orange behind the serrated peaks, a chilling certainty bloomed. Departure might be a privilege we'd already forfeited. It commenced as mere adventure, a pilgrimage into the wild conceived by my closest confidant, Reese, and I over countless months. Seasoned wayfarers, we craved the bite of challenge, the allure of earth untrodden, whispers of a sanctuary deep within the ranges, a pocket of wilderness inviolate against modernity's grasp, proved an irresistible siren song. We embarked under a crisp autumn sky, the dawn air sharp in our lungs, burdens heavy with the promise of a week's self-reliance. Those initial days unfurled exactly as dreamt, panoramas that stole breath, streams singing diamond-clear melodies, an isolation so profound it felt primordial, as if we were the last pulse beats on a cooling planet. Day 4 fractured that idyll. We were shouldering through a claustrophobic weave of ancient forest when Reese froze, a statue carved from sudden tension. Did you hear? His head tilted, an antenna straining against the woodland symphony. I held my breath, listening past the familiar rustle and chirp tapestry. Silence then, yes. Faint, ethereal, yet undeniable. Laughter, like wind chimes stirred by an unseen hand. Puzzled glances met across the moss-damp air. Kilometers lay between us and any charted path, any known human footprint. Whose joy echoed here? Curiosity, that treacherous compass, tugged us onward. We swam through thickets of grasping undergrowth until abruptly the trees relented. Before us lay a miniature valley, cupped in the mountain's embrace, and within it a sight that defied all logic, all maps. Not skeletal ruins, nor the ghost of a settlement, but Ethelgard, vibrant, alive. Tendrils of smoke curled from chimneys, children's cries laced the air, the hum of communal life resonated. Impossible, Reese breathed, the word a wisp of disbelief. There's nothing marked, not a whisper. As we stood rooted, agog, a knot of villagers turned, spotting us. Their reaction was instantaneous, a wave cresting, sheer, unadulterated welcome. They surged towards us, faces incandescent. "Visitors," cried the first to reach us, a stout man with eyes bright as polished river stones. "Oh, it has been an age since we were graced." We were swept up, engulfed by their eager tide, buffeted by a storm of questions. Our origins, our path? Were others following? The village patriarch, Silas, surprisingly nimble despite his wreath of white hair and time-etched skin, beckoned us towards his dwelling. "You must be weary beyond measure," he declared, guiding us into a dwelling of warm, close-grained wood. "Rest now. Tonight, Ethelgard celebrates your arrival with a feast." Too bewildered to protest, Reese and I found ourselves seated, steaming bowls thrust before us. While we ate a rich, unfamiliar stew, Silas spun the tale of their sanctuary, founded generations past by souls fleeing the cacophony of the outer world. "We lack for nothing here," he proclaimed, a fierce pride underpinning his words. "Self-sufficiency is our creed." An anthropologist's unearthed treasure, a society preserved in amber. Reese, utterly captivated, plied Silas with questions, absorbing their history, their customs. Yet a subtle discordance hummed beneath the surface for me. The villagers' fervor felt rehearsed, their smiles fractionally too broad, too fixed. As dusk deepened into true night, the entire community convened for the promised revelry. Music, strange and hypnotic, pulsed through the valley. Dancing feet stamped the earth. Food overflowed in staggering abundance. Their warmth was a heavy blanket, almost stifling, and always the sensation of being observed, appraised. Late, we retreated to the room Silas had assigned. The moment the door clicked shut, the words tumbled out of me, hushed and urgent. "We leave at dawn, Reese. We have to." He stared as if I'd sprouted horns. "Leave? Are you serious? This is monumental. We can't just walk away. Think of what we could learn." I tried articulating the nebulous dread coiling in my stomach, the persistent feeling of wrongness, but Reese waved away my anxieties. "Paranoia, mate. Pure and simple. They've been nothing but gracious." Sleep offered no refuge, only fractured visions of rictus grins concealing needle-sharp teeth. Morning found us joining the villagers for breakfast. Casually, striving for nonchalance, I mentioned our need to resume our trek. The shift was immediate, chilling. "Leave?" Silas repeated, his smile flickering like a faulty lamp. "But your arrival was only yesterday. Surely a few more days." My insistence died unborn as Reese interjected, his voice brimming with manufactured enthusiasm. "We'd be delighted." I shot him a look sharp enough to draw blood. He remained oblivious, lost in the village's spell. Days bled into one another, each sunrise cementing my unease. Every mention of departure met the same gentle, implacable resistance. Stay longer. So much unseen, so much unshared. Reese offered no alliance. He was utterly enthralled, weaving himself into the fabric of Ethelgard. I began to notice absences, the lack of young adults, only children, and the elderly peopling the lanes. Inquiries yielded evasive murmurs about rites of passage, temporary separations. Then came the nights, punctuated by disquieting sounds drifting from the encircling woods, rhythmic chanting, or noises horribly suggestive of muffled screams. Wildlife, they assured me, the wind's tricksy voice. 1 week melted into 2. Any attempt to reclaim our autonomy was deftly parried. Our backpacks vanished inexplicably. The routes out, perilous, requiring guides who remained perpetually occupied. My attempts to shatter Reese's enchantment, to make him see the gilded bars of our cage, proved futile. He spent increasingly long hours absorbing their lore, participating in their ceremonies. The friend I knew was fading, replaced by a placid stranger. One moonless night, sleep a distant shore, I resolved to investigate. Slipping from Silas's house like a shadow, I navigated the slumbering village towards the forest's edge. Voices, low and resonant, snagged my attention as I neared the tree line. Hugging the darkness, I crept closer. The sight that met my eyes still sent ice water through my veins. In a small, secluded clearing, illuminated by flickering torches, stood a cluster of villagers. Silas was among them. At the clearing's heart rested a crude stone altar, and upon it, I choked back a cry. A human form, terrifyingly still. Silas spoke, his voice an intense susurrus. The Ancient One's thirst, he intoned. Their due must be paid, but patience our guests will soon serve. Their vitality shall purchase our continued prosperity. I recoiled, stumbling backward, mind screaming denial. It couldn't be, yet the cold certainty settled deep in my bones. We weren't guests. We were livestock, fattened for slaughter. Heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I fled back towards the house. Reese. I had to reach Reese, drag him back from the precipice. I burst into our room, empty. His bedding lay undisturbed. Panic, cold, and absolute seized me. Had they taken him already? Was I too late? I tore through the silent lanes, a desperate search for any trace of my friend. Rounding a corner, I collided bodily with Silas. "My dear boy," he murmured, that unnerving smile firmly affixed. "Exploring so late?" "Reese?" The question ripped from my throat, ragged with fear. "Where is he? What have you done?" Silas's smile stretched, revealing an alarming expanse of teeth. "Reese perceives the truth now," he whispered. "He has accepted our ways, as will you, in time." I backed away, thoughts scrambling for an escape route. Get out, find help. But as I turned to bolt, figures materialized from the gloom, blocking my path. Villagers, emerging silently, encircling me. "Easy now," Silas soothed, his tone a caress that raised goose flesh. No need for agitation. You belong to the family now, forever. As the circle tightened, I saw him, Reese, standing amongst them, eyes glazed, his smile a hollow facsimile. Whatever ritual, whatever poison they'd administered, the friend I knew was extinguished. Oh, I fought a wild, thrashing desperation, but their numbers were overwhelming, their grip implacable. Dragged towards the woods, towards that obscene altar, the awful finality crashed down. We had walked into this snare willingly, lured by discovery's promise, blinded by counterfeit warmth. The chanting swelled, engulfing me as we neared the clearing. The ancient ones might hunger, but tonight the smiling folk of Ethelgard would dine. How these words are being transcribed, how much time has eroded since, remains shrouded. Memory is a tattered tapestry, shot through with ritualistic flashes, the lingering taste of something cloyingly sweet, metallic. Sometimes I believe I remain within Ethelgard's embrace, ensnared in some liminal existence. Other times, I fear this narrative is merely the final hallucination of a dying mind. Yet, if you decipher this, if this spectral message somehow breaches Ethelgard's borders, absorb my warning. Tread carefully in the world's forgotten corners. Not all hidden places yearn for discovery, and some smiles conceal teeth sharpened for the feast. Should you ever find yourself in a village too perfect, its welcome too suffocating, its grins too wide, flee. Flee and never glance back. Because once Ethelgard enfolds you, its embrace is eternal. Financial exigency, more than anything, guided me to this particular apartment several months ago. Its rent was a rare pocket of affordability in an otherwise expensive district. The floor plan presented as utterly conventional, save for one peculiar feature, an elongated hallway, its opposing walls entirely sheathed in mirrors. My first passage through it conjured images of carnival funhouses, a dizzying corridor where floor met ceiling in seamless reflection, multiplying my image into a receding infinity. A subtle tremor of unease registered, dismissed then as merely a reaction to an eccentric design choice. The lease was signed, predicated on the assumption that familiarity would dull the strangeness. In the initial weeks, the Hall of Mirrors scarcely impinged upon my awareness. My occupation demanded long hours, returning me home in a state of profound weariness. I'd traverse the corridor with scant attention, collapsing onto my mattress moments later. Occasionally, a flicker of movement snagged at the edge of my vision, my own reflection surely, eliciting that familiar momentary disorientation one feels encountering unexpected motion. I rationalized it away, attributing the sensation to simple self-perception. Then came a night steeped in unusual cold. The building's heating, notoriously unreliable, had seemingly surrendered, leaving a distinct chill upon my skin as I shed my coat. I cast it onto the living room sofa and turned towards my bedroom. It was then I observed the mirrors. They appeared clouded, filmed over. My first thought, my own warm breath condensing, was immediately invalidated. I wasn't exhaling visibly. Holding my breath as I peered closer. Every single panel bore the same thin, uniform layer of mist. No shower ran, no kettle boiled, no window stood open to admit damp air. I remained motionless, scrutinizing the glass, seeking a logical source for this pervasive fog. Within the haze, faint configurations began to emerge. Initially resembling simple marks, their edges possessed a definition that precluded random smudging. Drawing nearer, the lines coalesced into complex patterns, vaguely tribalistic, yet stubbornly indistinct. My eyes strained. With each blink, the shapes seemed to dissolve, only to reappear fractionally shifted upon reopening my eyes. For several minutes I stood transfixed, attempting to capture one stable image before it vanished. My heart commenced a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Perspiration beaded on my forehead, a bizarre counterpoint to the ambient cold that permeated the apartment. Hesitantly, I extended a hand, intending to wipe clean a section of the nearest mirror with my sleeve. The instant my fingertips made contact, a peculiar resistance met them, not the slick glide of condensation, but something akin to pressing against a membrane of viscous ice. The surface wasn't frozen, yet it lacked the feel of simple moisture. My fingers dragged, pressing harder, my nails scraped against an underlying solidity masked by the appearance of ordinary glass. The sensation provoked an involuntary recoil. I snatched my hand back, pulse hammering a frantic tattoo in my ears. The desire to investigate further evaporated, replaced by an urgent need for distance. Retreating towards my bedroom, I felt an unnerving certainty of being observed from behind. That night inaugurated a series of profoundly disturbing dreams. In the first, I found myself adrift in a dense, suffocating fog, visibility reduced to mere inches. Dampness clung to my skin. The air was glacial. I moved forward, the ground beneath yielding like sodden concrete. Then, shadows materialized, disembodied arms, forearms ending in grasping hands, reaching blindly from the swirling gray. Panic surged as I tried to flee, my legs leaden, resisting movement as if wading through thick, icy slush. The hands drew closer, brushing against my arms, my shoulders. A palpable terror constricted my chest, my breathing ragged, throat tightening. Just as one hand clamped firmly around my wrist, I jolted awake, drenched in sweat, the pre-dawn darkness absolute. My sheets were tangled, confining me. My chest ached from the violence of my heartbeat. Minutes passed before my breathing steadied. The following morning, traversing the corridor, I found the mirrors immaculate, gleaming and utterly normal. Had it not been for the vivid memory of the previous night's strangeness, I might have dismissed the entire episode as a vivid nightmare. Yet as dusk bled into evening, a check revealed the phenomenon's return. The mist reappeared, this time in irregular patches across the mirrored surfaces. Within these clouded areas, new patterns flickered, different from before, yet sharing the same intricate looping aesthetic. A chill traced its path down my spine. I fought against rising panic, attempting self-reassurance with improbable theories of condensation gradients or temperature differentials. But no rational explanation accounted for the precision of these ephemeral designs, their fluid, almost sentient shifting. An attempt to clean the mirrors proved unnerving. Armed with a cloth and glass cleaner, I found the fabric catching, snagging on the surface as if adhering to microscopic barbs. Applying firmer pressure produced a grating sound that set my teeth on edge, reminiscent of scraping frost from a winter windshield. My hand began to tremble, stomach twisting into knots. Breathing shallow, I abandoned the effort, leaving the cloth beside the cleaning bottle. In the ensuing nights, I developed an avoidance strategy, hastening through the corridor after dark with my gaze fixed firmly upon the floorboards. Yet the apartment's layout rendered the mirrored passage inescapable. Movement, imagined or otherwise, began to haunt my peripheral vision. Glancing up swiftly, I'd catch my reflection fractionally out of sync, an arm lifting an instant too soon, a head turning a beat too late. It felt uncannily like observing someone attempting, imperfectly, to mimic my actions. Each instance sent ripples of goose flesh across my skin. Sleep offered no refuge. The nightmares intensified, revisiting the same motifs: the suffocating fog, the grasping, disembodied hands, and the sensation of being inexorably pulled. I frequently woke gasping, sometimes crying out, my voice raw in the mornings, my reflection in the bathroom mirror showing sunken, haunted eyes. The thought of confiding in someone arose, only to be stifled by embarrassment. How could I articulate the suspicion that my corridor mirrors were somehow sentient, or worse? Contacting the landlord seemed equally futile. Dismissal or accusations of humidity issues felt inevitable. Approximately 2 weeks after the phenomena began, desperation prompted a new tactic. From a local hardware store, I acquired a small handheld steamer, hypothesizing that direct steam might force a clearer view of the patterns or reveal something fundamental about their nature. I waited until deep night, around 11. Extinguishing all lights save for the faint, ambient glow spilling from the living room lamp, I faced the corridor. The mirrors displayed their characteristic patchy fog. With trembling hands, I plugged in the steamer, its low hum the only sound in the expectant silence. Approaching the nearest panel, I directed the nozzle close to the glass. Steam billowed, momentarily thickening the obscurity. Then, beneath the added moisture, tiny fissures, like cracks in ice, began to propagate within the original mist, branching outwards. My heart hammered. These lines seemed to possess an intrinsic movement, shifting under the mirror's surface. I jerked the steamer back, stumbling, colliding with a small end table behind me. It overturned, sending its lamp crashing to the floor. The bulb shattered, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness. Scrabbling frantically for the wall switch, my fingers found it. Light flooded the hallway. The mirror before me looked almost ordinary again, merely steamed. The sinister, branching lines had vanished. I pulled myself upright, adrenaline surging, shoulders rigid, teeth clenched. The thought of vacating the apartment solidified into intent. Yet the security deposit was substantial, and breaking the lease represented a financial blow I could ill afford. Perhaps ignorance was possible? If I strictly avoided the mirrors after dark, could I maintain a semblance of normalcy? But the nightmares persisted, and the corridor remained a daily necessity. 2 nights passed. I elected to sleep on the living room sofa, hoping distance from the corridor might moment respite. Around 2 in the morning, a faint sound roused me, a low, abrasive scraping emanating from the hallway. My body went rigid, skin turning clammy. Sitting up, I stared towards the corridor's entrance, a dark maw reflecting faint streetlight off the glass within. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Reluctantly, compelled by a dreadful curiosity, I rose and crept cautiously to the threshold. The scraping ceased. My gaze met my reflection. My own silhouette was there, yes, but near the center of the right-hand mirror, a patch of fog swirled, coalescing into lines. I edged closer, intent on discerning the pattern. Then, the impossible happened. My reflection's head turned, its gaze locking onto mine before. I had moved mine an inch. I froze, breath trapped in my lungs. I watched, paralyzed, as my reflection's hand lifted, pressing its palm flat against the glass. My own arms remained limply at my sides. A wave of pure panic washed over me, sending me stumbling backward. Fumbling, I slammed the living room light switch, bathing the corridor in harsh illumination. Instantly, my reflection snapped back into perfect mimicry. The fog patch remained, the pattern within now blurred, indistinct. My heart felt dangerously overwrought. My breathing was loud and ragged in the sudden silence. My legs threatened to buckle. Yesterday, work was impossible. I remained in the living room, adrift, trying to formulate a plan. Covering the mirrors with sheets, newspaper, anything seemed the most direct approach, yet the sheer scale of the corridor, the height of the glass, felt daunting to tackle alone. Nevertheless, I made an attempt. Armed with duct tape and an old bed sheet, I managed to obscure perhaps 2 panels before an intense sensation of presence prickled the back of my neck. I spun around. The corridor stretched empty, populated only by my multiplying reflections. My nerves, utterly frayed, protested, chest tight, fingers trembling uncontrollably. I abandoned the task, leaving the partially draped sheet hanging limply. I retreated once more to the relative safety of the living room. And here I remain, recounting this. The hour is late, sleep feels like a distant, unattainable shore. My eyes keep straying to the corridor's entrance. Even with the lights blazing, the mirrors possess an unnatural sheen, like surfaces glazed with frost. My mouth is parched, my hands icy. Every innocuous building sound, groaning pipes, the distant whine of the elevator, triggers a jolt of fear. What comes next? Fleeing is tempting, but financially catastrophic. I am tethered here until a viable solution presents itself. The notion of shattering the mirrors arises, quickly followed by the chilling thought of the cost and the unquantifiable risk of unleashing something far worse. For now, vigilance is my only recourse. I sit, watching the corridor. My head aches. Nourishment has been neglected. My nerves are shredded filaments. The image of my reflection acting independently is seared into my memory, its hand against the glass, mine inert. Powerlessness is a cold shroud. The mere thought of traversing that hall to reach my bedroom sends my heart into overdrive, my breathing accelerating. Will this escalate or simply repeat night after agonizing night? I dread discovering the answer, yet choice seems illusory. This apartment, this prison of glass, is my reality for the foreseeable future. My next desperate measure might be to physically block the corridor's entrance, perhaps with furniture, anything to seal it off, to blind myself to the mirrors. I desperately wish I could dismiss this as delusion, an overtaxed imagination. But the tactile resistance of the glass, the ephemeral sigils in the mist, the autonomous movement of my own mirrored image, these experiences are undeniable, inexplicable. My hope resides in surviving the night without further incident, without succumbing to the nightmares, without the mirrors somehow extending their reach. That is the extent of my current ambition. I sit, keep the lights burning, and avert my gaze from any reflective surface. Perhaps daylight will bring a temporary reprieve, a fragile illusion of normalcy. But night invariably returns, and I harbor a growing certainty that the mirrors, and whatever lies within or beyond them, are not yet finished with me.